Well, thank you. Um, yes, well, I brought three things along with me, and this may be unusual in a way, but what I'm proposing to do is speak firstly about the kind of thing I do in the morning when I spend time in quiet. And the book that I study the Bible from is Fresh from the Word, comes from International Bible Reading Association. And I find it extremely good because many of the contributors are people from other parts of the English-speaking world. Mm-hmm. And it's spread all around, and it is wonderful to see and know what Christians in other countries are doing. And the kind of thing they're suggesting, we can think hard about because we're going to need their help over these coming years. Mm-hmm. So I just, as it happened, came this morning to look at a passage from St. John's Gospel, and basically the commentary had to do with what happened when the disciples said, "Who sinned, this man or his parents?" when seeing the blind man, and Jesus points out, "No, you've got your this all wrong," and the point made in this was in our own thinking about our faith, and indeed how we respond to the Bible, we may get things very wrong. And the glorious thing about the present time is that everyone is sharing their thoughts and in a way that I personally find immensely helpful. And so I brought out this from a woman who is actually, we get contributors from many parts of the world, and also from British churches. Jan-Picard has been contributing for years, and it's very, very good indeed. But I wondered whether, Ruth, you might like just to read the first 5 lines in this, because it says what her inspiration has been.
All right. This is Louise Jones. Mm-hmm. Louise Jones lives and works in Winson Green, Birmingham, in an embedded community-based organisation, the New Begin Community Trust, which aims to create a sense of family purpose and social cohesion in a community that is often overlooked.
And I knew that you, too, would be delighted to hear mention of Leslie Newport, because in our day, everything, I mean, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, everything that he wrote, we wanted to read, because he was one of the first bishops of the Church of South India, and also did so much to bring all the denominations together to work together under the Church of South India, or within the Church of South India. And so I've always immensely admired him. But it's interesting that there is a centre there, which obviously has been financed by money that's being given to enable the purposes for which I mentioned there, which seem to me to be very good indeed. And that's not untypical of some of the people who actually do the the writing. So that's the first thing I read, and then after that I move over to hymn books. For a couple of years, I have read the hymns of the 1990 book, John Bell's book, each day a new hymn, because ministers like myself tend to choose the hymns we rather like. And there are many we never, ever sing. And some of these 800 or so contributions to that hymn book are absolutely beautiful for their poetry, for what they say about the faith, and I find just read them quietly, slowly, as a prayer, is immensely helpful, I find. And I just wanted to continue that practice. Let me say just the last thing about the first hymn book. In that is, believe it or not, is a prayer from Ukraine, from I think the 1st century Greek church, and it's quite incredible what there is there, and it's beautiful because we sing too fast when we sing it to think about it, but if we can pray it, we get all kinds of new insights. I find that immensely helpful. And then the next thing is this new hymn book, and what delights me about it is, well, there are several contributors from our community in it. Pat Bennett is there, John Bell is there, Tom Gordon is there, and I'm only part way through it. It's lovely to see their thoughts. But what they have done is draw on the World Church and not only given translations of what is said in Africa, but actually have set it all out in their language. This is wonderful. And then the translation beside it. And of course, we tried to do that with the African songs that we sang, that John Bell drew together. So I recommend praying the hymn book, both hymn books actually. And the third thing, of course, is our own prayer book, and I find that immensely helpful for the day. And what else? I think that's all I want to say. Oh yes, I go on to listen to something from the Community for Action and Contemplation, Richard Rohr, to whom I was introduced by an associate of the Ionic community in Orkney. And these are simply wonderful reflections from a Roman Catholic Franciscan priest who is actually a modern mystic, really, and introduces us to a lot of the thoughts of mystics who themselves see everything not in binary terms, God up there and we're down here, but in terms of the whole of creation being permeated with the presence of God. Presence, I feel a sense of the presence. Let's call it that rather than God. Sense of the presence. And what is so wonderful I find actually, is going back to the mystics of the 12th century. We're going back to our own church. I mean, prior to the Reformation. And there are so many of these people, and they're also often quoted. And it's so helpful for thinking of God in a new way, as discernible in all of creation and in all people and in everything. That is an understanding that mystics had. And I find that today so helpful, because my grandchildren won't go inside a church, a building, but they love going on a pilgrimage around Iona and hear a little message too. And it's because young people today want to be able to, I think, have an opportunity to find God in creation. And they're much more interested. There are worship services that take place near Haddington, where the minister, one of our members, I think, conducts worship among the trees with the young people. A different way of understanding creation and finding a way to, what shall we say, reach out to young people today. Because it isn't easy. It isn't easy at all. So that's where I find myself. Now, I go back to Moses, and I find there that when he tried to name God, it was made very clear to him that was an Hebrew writers say this, an attempt to exercise some control over God. But in fact, what emerges from it is that it is utterly fruitless to attempt to name God, because any name would be only a partial understanding of who God is. And so I move on from there to what we were thinking about earlier. The Hebrew people have always stuck to the fact that they wish to name, they wish to believe in God, but not to name God. And they simply say the heavens declare the glory of God, the firmaments declare his handiwork. So what is revealed to the Hebrew people over the years, thousands of years, is that if we look at creation, we can see the glory of God. And if we look at creation, we can see his handiwork, his power. And of course, this ties up very well with what Jesus says in the Lord's Prayer. Yours is the power and the glory. These are the ways in which Jewish people, like Jesus, actually understood their beliefs were. So moving along from that, I come to look more closely at what we believe about Jesus himself. And I've come to the conclusion that actually we were quite wrong in the 4th century at the Nicene Conference to name Jesus as God. Because the effect of that has been to start murder and massacre throughout the Muslim world of Christians. And that's the last thing Jesus would ever have wanted to happen. So I like what is said by, I think, Mark Barrowman. He refers to Jesus as God's representative. And I find that a very, very useful phrase. There's a sense in which God is present, but actually has Jesus to represent him. And that, of course, frees Jesus from a whole lot of theological baggage which we've piled around him so that nobody else can see his prophetic word for us today. And I think I'm so grateful that possibility to speak about Jesus in a way that can actually be warmly accepted by Muslims who regard him as a prophet too. I don't know about the Jewish people, whether they regard him as a prophet. Some do, I'm sure. And if that is so, then his message is not only for his own day, but it becomes the message for the world today, which is being obstructed by the fact that he's called God. Now, there's plenty to discuss there. But that's where I find myself in all integrity, and I find myself believing much more firmly in God who reveals himself in creation and in all creation. It's like our friends who believe there is that of God in every person. And I find that helpful in sharing the good news today. Did I have anything else to share? Yes, prayer. To whom then do I pray? And I'm aware of, I have a sense of the presence, and the presence is the Spirit, and I believe that the Spirit of God is to be seen everywhere and in everything. But the Holy Spirit, according to the New Testament, is quite clearly focused on Jesus. So I find a way into Jesus in my prayers through the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is everywhere, in everything. And in fact, the Bible refers to us being in the Spirit. That's how the New Testament refers to us. We are in the Spirit and indeed in the Holy Spirit, and are able to continue to pray to that. I don't prefer not to use the word God. That presence. And one other last thing, if I can remember it. Let's leave it at that.